to my for everyone in the future, hello, who might be watching this and wanting to learn about investor relations with Leslie Frieze. So I'm excited to be back again, interviewing an alumna of the Goldie Initiative program, which is amazing, and to see your trajectory through JLL and now Green Court. You're in a topic that I think a lot of Goldie scholars want to hear about. Every year there is kind of an uptick of different areas of interest. And I think investor relations and equity and, getting funding is, part of the equation for a lot of Goldie scholars this year, especially as we expand to, I think New York has a lot of programs like that. So anyway, if you guys have questions throughout this, as you guys know, because you've done this before, we'll, save some questions to the end, but it's a small group. If you want to raise your hand, I will, if there's anything that we say in particular, just let us know and we'll unmute you and have you ask your question. So with that, Leslie, can you just do a general intro of who you are and your relation to the Gold Initiative?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm excited to do this. A big proponent of the Goldie program. I'm an OG scholar. I feel like I was part of, the earlier cohort. I was a Goldie scholar that graduated when it was from Roosevelt University in 2012. So when it was only at Roosevelt, but have seen the program expand, just from Chicago to different schools and now, kind of across the nation, which is awesome. And I'm happy to be here. So kind of background on me again, like make this as conversational as possible. Like if you guys have things that, as it comes up, happy to switch up and go into a specific area. But I went to University of Illinois, finance major. My parents told me, right, I was good at math, so it was like accounting or finance were kind of like the two options at the point, that point of like, what are you going to do? Out of college, I started working at a bank doing real estate lending. Kind of learned very early that like banking probably wasn't exactly what I was interested in, but I did like the real estate aspect of it. My dad had owned a small business doing actually garage doors, but like some real estate with it. So kind of grew up like walking properties, seeing it. So always kind of liked the tangibleness of real estate versus kind of, derivatives or currencies
Mm.
or things like that. Like, so I really like the tangibleness of real estate. So I quickly moved over to JLL and was brought in originally as like finance horsepower for like the global team that was doing acquisitions. So when I say acquisitions, because there's so many like
Yeah.
synonyms of how people use acquisitions, this was company acquisitions. So it was when JLL was like deciding to buy like a brokerage team or, the ones people probably are most knowledgeable on or know of is like Jill bought HFF, which was a huge brokerage. So brought on as largely kind of like the modeler or just kind of whatever I could get my hands in terms of like horsepower. And I would say that's kind of a theme of my career where it was kind of like, hey, your role isn't super defined, but you're going to kind of be our pinch hitter. And that was like a great career path for me at JLL. I ended up staying there over 15 years um, and really moved around from like working within the business. So working, like within leasing and capital markets, working in the investment management business, as well as the facility management business. So I did like get to see a lot of different areas within JLL. But throughout my time, I very much worked at like the strategy level. So I learned
Mm.
about a lot about the different, like how does jail want to grow? Like how does it want to invest in technology? Things like that. So ultimately, the culmination was that I knew a ton about like real estate. I knew a ton about JLL. So I moved into investor relations, which is
Mm.
essentially being the spokesperson for external stakeholders for the company. So I managing direct relationships with rating agencies, shareholders, banks. So basically, if somebody wants to know like what does JLL do and like why should we invest with JLL or why should we lend money to JLL? So within that, you kind of had to know everything like in terms of, hey, like why is your facility management business
Mm.
slowing or why is capital markets activity is down 20%. How is that going to impact your business. So I think what I really realized was like you have to know a ton about what is going on within the organization, understand the business, but then be able to tell the story of it,
Mm,
right? And not provide like too much detail or too little detail.
yeah.
So then it brings me to where I am today. JLL was great, great organization to work for, very good culture, but I really wanted to get closer to the real estate. I was sitting at a very like,
Mm,
okay, like let's talk about this portfolio deal, but like I'm not actually seeing the assets or, like underwriting the assets. So Green Courte is an small, like niche investment manager based out of Chicago. We manage like $2 billion of assets, invest in niche asset classes. So, um, some very kind of non-sexy ones in terms of like parking lots, manufactured housing, senior living, and now like industrial outdoor storage. So much different than like my jail days, which were much more like office focused, multifamily and such. But effectively, what I do now is like I would say, like if I had to sum it up very quickly, is like I
yeah.
am the salesperson for Green Court. If we raise and invest funds, so I'm looking for people to invest in our funds. Our investor base is largely institutional, so I'm working with like the pension funds, university endowments to get them to invest with us. We're small, so I would say I am also like our marketing department and
Mm,
content creation, like no one is like creating, materials for me or something like that. I'm creating the storyline and the materials and then, working on new relationships and managing the relationships that we have. So that was a
love it.
lot, but I think it gives you a
It
good kind of
was,
trajectory of where I have come from.
yes, and that's very helpful. And you hit one of my main questions, which is always like, explain to me your job, like in, in the most basic of terms, which I think you did in a way that helps me understand that you're, selling what Green Court and what JLL has to offer and like that kind of knowledge base that you have to have. I do have one other question I always have to hit because I like tracking this and answering it. That before you were selling, parking lot space,
Yeah. Yeah.
funds to people, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think honestly, like I would have been a realtor in a different life.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
I grew up in the the house hunters age of where like you
yeah.
watched HGTV and like showing people around. Or I think I would have done something um like a little bit more like on the construction management,
Mm,
architecture, like how you build real estate. I think I very much have like ended up in the right industry. I didn't have any, that's probably boring from that aspect. People usually,
no.
like have a little wilder, but like I think I would have just gone like potentially like closer to the real estate or like under, maybe development or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, I
But
love it. No one's said that yet. Which just seems like such an obvious answer, like a realtor, like go into
right.
real estate. I love that. Um, I definitely want to get into some questions in a bit about investor relations, but I'm like so interested in how you navigated a few of your career steps. And like for Goldie scholars on the call, like how did you get into like high level strategy? Because I think I love the sound of that, like being a person in the room that people go to and they like trust your opinion on a strategic plan. But you started in banking. Like, how did you make some steps to get into positions in the room that people listen to you?
Yeah, sure. I would say I feel fortunate and lucky that like the role in which I came into jail, I was like had access to senior management and
Mm,
just being in the room in the beginning of my career was very helpful just because I like got to hear a lot of the flow, which I think, I always kind of say if you can ask to be part of the meeting is like always very helpful. But I think with time, what I kind of learned, I will say, the beginning, I was like very into, you're kind of like, okay, like I'm here not to say something. But then I
mm,
think, ultimately I learned fast that like every opinion is kind of, validated, whether
yeah.
you're at an analyst level or a senior level. So I think that was kind of what helped me is just speaking up when I either had a question or if I didn't agree? Like like in a way, like not that I didn't agree or like challenging, like, have we thought about that? And I think that like helped to build my credibility in terms of like, okay, well, she can add value more than just like doing what has been like, just we want her to do this. So I think that was helpful and that opened a lot of doors in terms of like, okay, we have this project. I wouldn't say like, right, there were some things like, hey, I want to get more experience closer to the business. Like when I asked for those things, I think it was an easier conversation.
Mm.
So I think I know that that's like kind of the cliche advice that everyone gives, but it is like just speak up. Like if you have thoughts,
Yeah.
or you want to try something, it's really just speaking up.
Yeah. People are always impressed with people with young people who come with a fully prepared thought, and you would be surprised like how little that sometimes happens, right? So it's always impressive when I think young
Yeah.
people speak
Because I
up.
see it now where I'm like, right, somebody will, some of the junior people will kind of sidebar with me like after
Mm-hmm.
a meeting or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I'm like, hey, you don't need to wait to, see if
Yeah,
like what my reaction is like outside of that. Like just do it in front of
go for
everyone.
it.
It's actually fine. People like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it made sense your reason to jump from JLL to Green Court, but um, can you talk a little bit more about any challenges that you had with that? I mean, I know a lot of scholars are, looking for jobs or the job market now. Any thoughts on just like advice on finding that next right fit for you? Especially, you were at JLL for 16 years. That's a big
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I would say like, right. Like there were even like when I was looking at roles, people like had a very big, like you came from a very big organization. How are you going to fit
Mhm.
into like,
Doing your own
you know,
marketing materials and stuff.
yeah, exactly. But I always say, actually, I was like, I didn't have a huge team below me at Gel.
Hmm.
Like, there wasn't like a depth of, I was doing like, I've always been a contributor as well and not just a manager. Um, I think it's actually like my finding was that I always think is interesting when I am talking to people about like, do you want to go to a big organization or a large organization? I've actually found at a big organization, you actually have a little like my experience was I had a lot more autonomy in terms of like, okay, because like the decisions that I was making were not that big in the realm of the whole organization. So you
Mm.
kind of just like moved. Like moving to a small organization, I've just kind of found, right? Like it's smaller and like everyone's involved in every deal and every decision. So it's a lot more like bringing people along than I would have expected. Because you kind of think like, right, you go to a small organization, you have to be like, let's move. But actually, you realize these decisions are much more
Mm.
impactful because, right, they like the organization is smaller. So that has been like a really big learning, like for me, going to a small organization. But
Mhm.
on the flip side, right, like the things that I'm working on, like if I close an investor, that's a huge deal, right? Like it is, you definitely can validate like the impact that you're having on the firm. So I think that like is something that I've enjoyed because I could say, okay, I did this and I can see that like this is helping the continuity of the firm versus like, right, okay, I completed a project and whether this, like
Yeah,
moving on to the next project, like how much.
totally. There's a couple of people on the call right now. You're on big companies, but I do think there was a value for you, Leslie, of staying at jail, like having a nice like longevity at JLL. Do you
Yeah.
agree? Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, I think
yeah.
like I stayed there a lot. I feel like what is probably like incredibly long time in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Um, and it served me very well. I
Hmm.
think just like I'll be really honest, right? Like I stayed there like, from being right out of college to, getting married, having kids, and like then
Hmm.
that like right now I am on my like next chapter of like kind of like
Yeah.
where do I see myself in the next 5 to 10 years? And
Hmm.
I didn't see the growth
Right.
True, like or I
Hmm.
didn't wasn't excited about like another role there. So I
Yeah.
think I could have easily probably like stayed. There's so many opportunities, but like for me, I was like, okay, I need a pivot. Like I
Yeah.
am at like an inflection point in my life
Hmm.
personally, and I want something different professionally. It was why I decided to.
Yeah, totally. So what does your day to day or week to week look like? What are some of the projects, either specific projects you're working on right now or just like in general, like to share with the group of what are the type of work that you're doing?
Yeah. And I guess like when you think like investor relations, there's like a couple types of roles that I would say like where like some roles are like 100% fundraising where like literally you
Mm.
are just like the right like hunt and like gather like the investments like you are like out on the road pitching like um and like don't really get involved in any kind of like the operational side of it.
Mhm.
I would say I'm kind of in the middle where I would say about 50% of my time is spent on the phone, prospecting, calls with new people. And then the other 50% of the time is either prospecting to figure out who, or like, creating content to send out to our targets, um, relationship management. So, right, like making sure that like our investors, when we are raising the next fund, will, they know what's going on with us as well. I also we put on like a couple investor events. So
Mm.
think presentations, like
Hmm.
organization of that. Um, and then I am very much like in the flow, like need to be in the flow of the information, like of what is going on, like the current acquisitions that we're looking at. So I sit in and like our our like our Monday all hands call and like pipeline reports. We have like weekly calls with each strategies to kind of like hear what's going on. So I spend a lot of time making sure that like I know what's going on, not only like with Green Courte but also, right, like kind of always reading stuff about like industry stuff. Because, like, the thing is, like, if I'm talking to a new prospect, they expect me to kind of be like,
Yeah, the
I
expert.
want to be more than just a door opener. I think there's more value. Like some people could view, like sales or investor relations as like
Mm.
door openers. But I take a lot of pride in like having, a view on what's going on, knowing what's going on, and being able to like tell the Green Court story. So I would say it's probably 50% of my time is like today. Like I have this and then I have a couple like calls in the afternoon.
Mm.
One with a current investor that just like wants to hear what's going on, and then one with like a pension fund that I had been kind of,
Mhm.
talking to just to right now we're actually not like actively fundraising, so I'm very much in the I'll update you on what we're doing and hopefully in the next 6 months when we like launch our next fund,
Yeah.
then they're ready.
Which leads to kind of a question I ask everybody just because I'm so interested in what your thoughts on the market are, So what are your thoughts, Leslie, like when it comes to your job at Green Court on the market as it is and, what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to invest, right? Like the big thing, real estate allocations have been down because like I think, right, like people were either lacked liquidity, haven't gotten money back from previous investments that they've made, or they just felt like the values were not there. I think
Mm.
right now is like specifically within the sectors that we're investing
Mm.
is a great time and there's a lot of value to be made in that like we can find assets where we're buying at like a discount to replacement cost at a good basis. We are so we're value add investors. We're usually investing in assets that need some type of like improvements, whether
Mm.
it's,
Hmm.
investing capital in the infrastructure and senior housing. Maybe it's like adding amenities, parking lots. It could be just paving it, but things like
Yeah,
that where
yeah.
we can like invest capital and then like generate our returns. So I think it's a pretty good time. I mean, there is obviously a lot of macro noise out there in terms of like interest rates, and real estate is so like interest rate driven that I think that's giving a lot of people pause, but it does seem like, people have gotten used to like operating in a volatile or unknown environment, where I think a year ago people were like in more of a wait and see.
Mm.
And I think now people are more, like ready to transact, like
Open
transact
to
without,
new
yeah.
ideas and maybe new areas to invest in and getting creative. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I think something I would say just like, which might be like kind of interesting for people here is so for me, like to get a new investor, like, so I said, I'm, speaking with a pension fund later today. Like the sales cycle is long. Like
Mm.
it is like an extended process in terms of, right, we are gonna spend at least, probably a year dating,
Mm.
before there's any like type of decision. And there's a lot of, not only from like, right, it can start out just very much as like, let's talk, but then like specifically with like US pension funds, there's like a lot of like diligence and steps that you have to like then qualify, like jump through once they've kind of decided that like they're like, okay, we get your strategy and like from a high level, we like it.
Yeah.
So I would say there is just a lot of like relationship management building, like share, like trying to bring them along as much as you can and like move them through the funnel, but it is like a slow process. Like
Mm.
I think we don't really do retail investors, which would be, like individual, like high net worth investors. The decision process for that is like I think just like a little bit shorter, but
Mm.
ours. So um I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, you
How
can
do
go a
you,
long time without a win, I guess is
yeah,
how I would say it is. Like closing like, 5 or 7 new commitments in 2 years is great. So you just like to give you an idea of like the numbers, it's
yeah.
not like a huge, and there's like, but that's very much a Green Court, like the
Mm.
Origins or like I'm trying to think the other Chicago-based ones that are more high net worth focused. It's like a very different model.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Um, and where do you find your prospects? Do you do networking or is it like online research or other stuff I don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, we're like, I would say it's actually like a pretty small population of,
Yeah.
so we target university endowments. So
Mm.
there's kind of like a finite amount of university endowments. So we kind of know who we're going to work with, or or we've talked to them in the past. I should have
Yeah.
said Green Court's been around over 20 years. Was founded by Randy Rowe, who was a Sam Zell like
Mm.
protege. So
Mhm.
like deep roots, I would say, in Chicago and like within the real estate industry itself. So has a lot of relationships, like specifically with the university endowments. Um, Otherwise, like, and we do like foundations and pension funds. I mean, I do some like more forward, like using Preqin or Fintrux, which is like a family office service provider, and
Mm.
Preqin's like a data provider for investors.
Mm.
We'll do some like more just true cold outreach. The organizations that like we participate in or like, right, we like are kind of on the conference circuit, I guess you would say, is like
Yeah.
PRIA, for lack of a better.
Yeah.
Um, we do PRIA, we do IREI, we do some of like the private. So it truly is like network, like so some of the more, unknown foundations and family offices will come through that. But the otherwise, like the endowments and the pension funds are there's largely a population. You pick which
Yeah.
one, you from a
Totally.
size perspective or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was like, do you go to a pre conference and just like talk to somebody? I mean, that's always like the dream, I guess, of networking that you're gonna
Yeah.
go and just strike gold on the one random person you talk to. But Doesn't always
I think more
work.
often than not, you're talking to your peers. But
Yes.
to be very honest, like you end up talking to your peers at
Yeah.
the conference, which is like helpful too, because I think that's where actually I get a lot of my like, hey, what's going on in the market? Are you seeing the
Mm-hmm.
things like, right? Like understanding. Are you guys getting fee pressure? Because how we make money is we charge a fee for investors to invest along, invest with us. So, whether there's fee pressure or like things like, like, are you guys
Yeah.
getting more favorable terms that usually comes out of the conferences actually?
Yeah. Awesome. Um, I have a couple more questions to ask before I'll turn it over to the group. So start thinking about your questions, guys. Um, One question I have is just kind of a general like advice you'd have for somebody getting into this industry, skills that they might want to work on now, or networks that they want to build, etc. Like, what advice would you have to someone who wants to do what you do?
Yeah, I think it's just the ability to tell a story. I think in
Mm,
any way, shape, or form, you need to be able to tell your own story of why you can add value. But like, it's really important that you can tell like when you're trying to describe what a company does or like what's going on, it's being able to like
hmm.
bring people along in like the arc of the story and close it. And, I just think communication skills are going to take you far, no matter which way
Yeah.
you end. So, it's ultimately it's going to help you either find a job that you want or put you in like a role like this. Because I think ultimately in senior level roles, we all kind of end up in sales.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I always talk to scholars like when you're crafting your elevator pitch, like what's the thread that like pulls it all together? Like think about
Right.
all the points you want to make, all the big parts, but what's the core theme? Because then people will absorb it and remember it so much better than a bunch of random data points,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I
Uh,
always think too, I always say to people when I was like, in the end, we're all human. So
mm,
a lot of sales is being able to like connect first as a human and then having something, then having
yeah,
something like behind that. So you have to kind of connect as humans first and then,
yeah.
versus like,
Make deals
in an
second.
age of AI, I feel like the humanness and like the relationship piece is only getting more important as like everyone can send out like as many cold emails that we all know like was
Yeah.
written
Our
like
our our shields to like AI are going to get better and better about just like our human being like, oh, that's AI. I don't want to engage with
right.
it. But great question, great topic. Like everyone's talking about it. How about you and AI? How does your work bring AI? Does Green Court use AI?
Yeah, I would say we are probably slower to the A. We were
Yeah.
slower, but like now accelerating. I
Okay.
think there's a lot of room where, right, like things that you're doing on a keyboard, where you're like Excel input, things
Hmm.
like that. AI is just really useful on some of that. So we've
Hmm.
actually partnered with Cadastral, which is a real estate specific AI. I think it's like basically, I am no AI expert, but it's like a specific company that has built this like AI agent for commercial real estate. So we've kind of partnered with them to help us on a lot of like our processes in terms of like, and more think about like underwriting assets, like asset
Hmm.
management, budget, things like that. The use case for me is honestly, I still have to have the original thought. Um,
Yes.
like I have to say like AI for me is not going to like articulate what the competitive advantage is for Green Court because
Yeah.
it just comes out very, generic.
Hmm.
Um, but I will say like the speed to which like I can write a very rough press release and
Yeah.
have it, you
Truly.
know, um, format it. So that was like kind of specifically like my use case,
Hmm.
but within the organization we're like
How,
lease abstracting, things like that.
how do you
So
spell the
yeah, so it's cadastral. It's like Here, I was just on their website actually. Cadastral.
That's a strange name.
Yeah, Cadastral. So it's AI agent for commercial real estate workflows.
Hmm. I'd be actually interested
The
in
one with
talking to
that,
them
just
again.
like to pitch, I haven't worked a
Yeah.
ton with them, but we have like engaged with them as an organization. Um, they're very like they're almost like a consultant where they're using Claude, they're using like
Hmm.
ChatGPT as the backbone, but they will like kind of set up the prompts, like work with you, like you explain it, where we don't have the horsepower nor like an AI like expert on like
Yeah,
in-house.
right.
So they are small and really willing to work with you, which
Hmm.
for us made a lot of sense.
Yeah, super cool. All right, last question before I turn it over. Books, podcasts, anything that you're listening to,
Yeah.
either work-wise or personal-wise that you recommend?
I'll start with work wise.
Okay.
I was like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I would say. I really like the distribution. The distribution is by Juniper Square, which is like investment management software, and Brandon Dobell, who is the host of that. I think he asks very like insightful questions of like real estate founders. So they
Mhm.
usually have on senior leadership from the real estate industry. And I think he makes
Cool.
it very like approachable, like, and it's like meant to educate. So like anybody at any level, and they give some good insights. The other one I like, which isn't like specifically real estate, is billion dollar backstory.
Hmm.
Um, so she's like a capital raiser and has like the host has and like has a company where she helps, like she's basically like a
Mhm.
placement agent,
Yeah.
um but I don't know. I like how she like positions her, like questions, and you get some like good I think she very much focuses on like the humanness of
Mhm.
like how do you create a connection and like move people along. So those are the ones
Awesome.
that I like.
All right, cool. Those are great recommendations. I love to hear like especially real estate specific podcasts because I feel like I can share that with scholars
Yeah,
easily.
that's a good one, like especially for people like the distribution is a good one just to like learn, you
Yeah,
know.
love it. All right, questions from the group. Anybody?
Yeah,
Hannah.
I have a few. I mean, we do very, very similar things. Our
Okay.
jobs very much overlap. I work on a portfolio team at CBRE Investment Management, in industrial real estate. So currently I'm
Okay, there you
there, as
go.
you can tell. And I work closely with our investor solutions, or what we call client solutions team, which is, the ones that have the relationships with investors, mainly focused on pension funds, sovereign wealth funds.
Okay.
I guess I have a few questions, but the first one is over the last 24 months or so, it's been a very, very difficult capital raising period. And now with the war in Iran, what have you been hearing from your current clients, plus the clients that you're currently trying to, you know, sell on your firm? What has been their attitudes towards, investing in real estate, especially because over the last same period of the last 18 to 24 months, the actual margins on real estate deals, and I do both development and operating, the margins have come in significantly due to the rising costs in construction, the higher inflation. So the returns that these investors are getting on these deals are a lot smaller. And obviously, we all make our money on fees.
Mhm.
So we're somewhat not feeling that same impact that these investors are. And as someone who's sitting in my role, these are the thoughts that I'm having that I can't voice because
Mhm.
it essentially convinces them not to invest and we need their money.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
guess those are some.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I didn't know if it was cut out. Um, I'll start with, yeah, I mean, we are US investors and like primarily our investor base is US. We have a couple international. So in my JLL days, like I will say it just is a lot less. While people are, obviously with what's going on with Iran, like it's impacting like the US markets as well, but I just feel like it's not like um as directly impacted yet. And I mean, you're right. We've had like a very slow, right? Like, I mean, fundraising volumes are, kind of, had been stagnant, I guess, the last couple years. And so it's been a hard environment to raise any capital. And like, by the stroke of luck, I feel like we nailed down a couple new investors, but I think that's also because we are like niche is very hot, right? Like people want
Mhm.
alternatives. So what industrial was and what multifamily was, like that alternatives, like, provided the diversification that they wanted. Um, Specifically for us, I think everyone's just like still kind of in like a wait and see. We're actually not fundraising now, but what I've heard from, it's publicly known, but like UTIMCO, which is like Texas's, like Texas universities, um, large endowment, like they just said they're kind of like in a hold, right? Like we're gonna give this a couple months to see where it's at.
Mm.
So, because I think at this point things don't pencil. So I guess, I don't know if that answers it, but it's like it's challenging right now, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean it answers it with the wrong answer in the sense
Yeah.
that like I was hoping maybe you had different information than what I've been experiencing and hearing, but
Yeah.
I mean it makes sense that it's fairly consistent across the board. Um what was I about to say? Oh, in terms of your alternatives deals, so you mentioned that you do a decent amount of iOS. Have you
Yeah.
found that your threshold in terms of kind of underwriting iOS deals is higher these days than maybe some of the other other asset classes? I know you said you focus mainly on
Yeah.
niche asset classes, but because there's something to be said for in terms of the main capital expense just kind of being repaving and maintaining parking
Yeah.
lots, but essentially it's just
It's like
a
a fee
lot that
stream
just
nearby.
continues
Yeah.
to make money. It's like a very straightforward fee structure. Have you guys found that there is a larger return profile? Because I've been hearing that more recently in terms of infrastructure, which I guess iOS kind of falls in like a
Yeah.
little in between. There has been higher margins.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of capital moving into iOS, like, and right, that a lot of people that are doing kind of like you know, the 5 acre deal, like the $5 million deals, signing uh, a 10-year triple net and like getting pretty, there really isn't a lot of, it's low capital investment and they're going to hold it for 5 years and like they can get pretty good returns from that. It's actually not where we're playing. We're doing kind of like the 25 to 50 acre parcels, more kind of complicated, putting some development on it, doing like ISFs on it. Just because I think we've found that the tenant base is a little deeper there, where we can take like, a 25-acre piece, split it into two, put a service facility on it, and drive the returns that we want. Like we target a 15 net IRR and we have a longer hold period. So we're like a 10 to 12-year hold period. So we have longer to get our returns. So we can do those more complicated deals. I mean, I think the thing with the people that are doing these smaller deals and such, right? Like they're moving fast. There's probably a ton of environmental issues on them, and when they go to like move them, like they might run into an issue. But that's where we're kind of focused.
A net 15 is pretty high, especially in today's market. What's driving that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're underwriting not really cap rates aren't really,
Yeah.
like the exit cap rates, but we're like
hmm
underwriting, right, the in cash flow increases based on,
Do you
the
structure it
improvement.
with regular rent escalations that you would in like a relatively normal lease?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Um, and like, I mean, we raise diversified funds, so iOS is only a portion of it. So
Mhm.
like I like we'll, like on the senior housing side, right? There's rent escalations, there's lease up room. A lot of times in the deals we're doing like a lease up that will, get the math to the 15. But yeah, I mean, our capital is expensive, so it is like finding deals that math to get to a net 15 is
Yeah. And
challenging.
you guys are only close end, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Okay, so what number fund series? I mean, it sounds like you're not raising, but what
Yeah,
are you
we
on?
just raised our sixth.
You're six. Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay,
So,
congrats.
but like the fund sizes are small because the deal size we're doing is small, right? We're like doing
hmm
15 million, like
Yeah.
15 to 25. We've done some larger ones, obviously, but so our fund size is like 500 million. So we'll
Okay, I
look to
mean,
like,
500, that's not
No,
I
it's
mean,
not
bigger
small,
than
but
I
it hasn't,
expected. Yeah.
yeah, it hasn't grown. Oh, like
Mm.
we're not AUM growers where we're not going to have $1 billion fund within like the niches, like, because we can't get the money out the door faster. And then, right, then that's going to
Yep.
impact our returns as well.
Yeah. It's very, I work in the open end structure, but we do have a closed
Okay.
end
And
series.
all
And
industrial or
so
like,
no, I'm only industrial. So I'm an
okay.
open-ended
Yeah.
core plus industrial fund, but we have a regular core diversified fund, and then we do have a closed-end series that has been a learning experience, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, some of which you've mentioned in terms of you can't get the money out fast enough. Currently, it's just hard to raise money, period.
Right.
Also, with market changes, some of these deals that penciled that you invested in no longer pencil when it comes time to sell. So there's been a lot to learn, but
Yeah.
long term is like I sit in my role now. I feel like there is more benefit in terms of a closed end vehicle than an open end one. Yes, there's finite times, so that can be the argument on good and bad. But I think in terms of like penciling a deal, having like that direct time period on which you're supposed to sell gives makes your underwriting a lot more
Yeah, because you
exact.
know that, right? You
Mhm.
know you run the model out 10
Exactly.
years. I think,
Versus
right.
my
The
models
thing,
are complicated
yeah,
because
I
it's
think that
funding.
finding investor, like just liquidity has been, like people now are just like so focused on like DPI and like DPI is like how much basically how the distributions that you're getting back or cash flow distributions that are being made. So tying on the flip side of that, tying your money up, like getting investors willing to like tie up money for 10 to 12 years. That's where like the endowment model. So
Mhm.
endowments are funding, like basically helping to fund universities that have a very long-term
Mm.
outlook. So that's where like their model works for our
That makes
investments.
sense. Okay, and I have one more question. It's a question I've been asking people whenever I do more of these interview or like intros lately. And it's, is there a moment within your career that you kind of recognize as one of like the most pivotal or
Mm.
important decision making time periods? And what was that?
Great question.
Yeah. Um, I would say there was a point at JLL where I could have like there was very much there was turnover happening and it
Mm.
was like I could have gone like one or two ways. Well, maybe say one of three ways. Like it was either like leave because like hey, like there's like a lot of shuffling going around, not really sure of like where I was going to fit in, or I could have gone like at the time I was working along doing a lot with LaSalle, so I could have gone within LaSalle. Or then I was kind of given, I had started sitting in on like investor meetings and, kind of working on some more of that. Um, so I'd say that was pretty pivotal. I was like, okay, I'll try this. It was like a little uncomfortable because I was like, okay, I know nothing about like equity shareholders at this point or something like that. But I kind of just did it. And ultimately I'm glad I did it. Um, because I looked pretty, I mean, let me be very honest. I looked very seriously at leaving JLL and then like I kind of like was very open about it. I was like, hey, I have opportunities outside of JLL or, tell me why I should try this opportunity in investor relations. So I'd say that would be the pivotal point for me.
Awesome. All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I went on.
Good questions.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you, Hannah. That's why I was like, I'm glad Hannah's here because you'll ask some in-depth questions that I can't even scratch the surface on. Does anyone else have a question they want to unmute for?
Yeah,
Layla?
I can go next. Thank you for your time today. So recently kind of decided to actually centralize my thesis around iOS. So kind of looking for some big themes, big trends, things I should be paying attention to as I kind of conduct this research. Everything, I guess, from raising capital, concerns of the market, and then sort of like a secondary question, a little bit more specifically of what value add looks like with what you're doing. Just kind of curious. I know Hannah mentioned, pavement, maybe building a small operational building, et cetera. But if there was like anything, I guess, more in depth of what you do in that regard, that would be great.
Yeah. I can start there because that's kind of the easiest, most direct question, just in terms of like what value add looks like in iOS. It is like a lot of it comes down to the like the pavement, the structure, like what like a gravel lot is going to get different rates
Mm,
than a concrete lot is going to get. Um, and then it's fencing and
mm,
security are the other two big ones in terms of like, do we want, like it fully gated and they're like, what kind of technology? Like that's in terms of can we do so that we underwrite ours with no staff on site. And given that we're doing larger deals, you'll have a multi-tenant site. So we need to make sure that like getting in and out and access um and then lighting and security cameras, I would say just like those are largely the things that from a value add perspective, but we will, so then going back to kind of like a more broad question, I mean, environmental issues within
mm,
iOS is such like an important part of like finding deals, underwriting them, due diligence, making sure like from a risk perspective, we are very conservative in terms of like we are going to understand and we are going to do like the phase ones and phase twos. And we want like the goal for us is that we are going to have a clean site when we sell it, where I think there are other operators within like will take a certain amount of risk. Yeah. So I would say we do, in terms of our sourcing, we spend a lot of time making sure that we understand like what this was used before, like do they already have like environmental issues? Um, but as part of our value add, like we just did a deal in Columbus where we are going to remediate like half of,
Yeah.
like, and that will take on a 10-year hold, that will take like the first like 3 to 5 years, to remediate. So that can be part of like when we look at like our business plan, some of it will be like an iOS remediation can be like part of a business plan. And then your first part, you were saying you're working like on your investment thesis on iOS just generally, or
Yeah. So you bring up sort of like dirty land and remediation, but our thesis is particular to that of which that we would seek brownfield sites and be
Mhm.
the ones to remediate them and then,
Okay.
conduct or I guess hold them for anywhere from 2 to 5 years and
Okay.
then, put it together, roll it up, and then maybe have an institutional sale. Obviously, that would be nice. But yeah, so just I guess any recommendations with that particular, I guess, specific thesis of brownfield remediation, anything you think I should be aware of, macro, micro, everything in between.
Yeah. I mean, I look at like iOS as like a covered land play, in terms of, right, you're like buying land that is irreplaceable, usually near intermodal transportations. We've actually bought a couple like near the ports,
Yeah.
mm,
um, that you can hold and improve and generate cash flow that like, I mean, ours is very much the same of like a roll up
Yeah.
and then a sale to like, creates optionality to sell it to an institutional um buyer. Uh, and I think that business case and investment thesis makes a lot of sense because there isn't like the whole NIMBYism, like no one wants
mm,
more iOS, just because a lot of times even like it doesn't add a ton to the tax base for municipalities. So like ultimately if they can get, more pure industrial on it, so like the land banking and covered land play of it makes a lot of sense, as well as, right, like there's a lot of still non-institutional sellers in this space
Yeah.
that can't make kind of like the investment in the remediation.
Yeah.
Um,
Or just don't know how even, like
right. I
it's
mean, there's a lot that goes, right? Like I would say we have some like kind of in-house, but like a lot of ours is done typically, with like a contract, a consultant that specializes in that, versus like someone, because I think like I am no expert in
right.
remediation by any means.
Well, thank
Um, so is that helpful?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Um, I'm gonna remove spotlight. Um, any other questions? I have my another couple questions I can ask, but just wanna, if anyone goes off mute, I'll try to keep an eye out for you guys. But one question I have is like trying to figure out company culture. I mean, this could go for any company, but like in specifically in investor relations, like it seems like an intense role to me personally. I don't know, depending on what company you're at. And how do you find a company that you think is going to support you or support being a mom and, working and like,
Yeah.
how do you figure that out when you're just like in the interview phase or even looking online?
Yeah, I think like specifically like what I would say in investor relations, if somebody is like saying like, hey, we want to bring on someone who has like just to be old, like a Rolodex of like relationships that they're gonna bring over, and we want you just to like go out and raise capital for the strategy. I'm not gonna lie, that gives me like a little pause because
Mm.
it's like it's very unrealistic. Like you can have relationships, but like the like understanding the new strategy and like a lot of it comes down to, like it's different than Hannah, right? Where you have like CBRE, like a brand behind it. There's a lot of like middle market, like lower market that like it's based on the people and the founder and the leader at the time. So you're really like pitching the people. So like the idea that you're going to come in and be a capital raiser that like brings all these relationships right away just because you changed jobs is highly unrealistic. So I would just say like I give pause when I see like those type of like we want you to because I think you need a team that understands what goes into raising capital because it's a long-term relationship that you're looking to create. So I guess that's how I would like
That's a great
I think
tip.
it's just important to ask questions about like setting realistic expectations on the amount. And a lot goes into raising capital. Again, like they're like choosing you as the fiduciary of their capital. So it's not like whether I can pitch them on like that our strategies are great, but like, right, there's also like, is there the operational due diligence? Do you have your like basically your house in order? Like, what is the succession planning for like the senior leadership team? What are their ages? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what is like inherently so different than when I left jail. Like, this is a small, like, they're choosing you out of everyone else. So I think like in thinking about like if you were to like be looking at roles like this, I would just make sure that there's realistic expectations because some of the way job roles are written to this, I think like it seems highly unreasonable that you're like, okay, cool. Within a year, I'll bring you all this capital over because it doesn't just happen that way.
Yeah, it's gonna end set you up for failure, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did this event with Julie Sharp of Merchants Capital 1 or 2 months ago, and she was talking about a sale point of her and her team with doing a deal with her is that they are just younger. Because I'm so fast. Everyone in real estate talks about these like 10, 15-year deals. And almost no, to your point, Leslie, earlier, like almost nobody sticks around for that long. So it's like
Yeah.
you're making a deal with a group of people that might change over the years. So,
Right. Like that's not going to be there to like see the investment through, right? So those can
yeah.
be like very real conversations about like the health of the CEO, right? Like we
Oh my
have to, right?
gosh.
If your CEO is 70, right? Or
Yeah.
60, or like and the fund life is 10 years, like there are real things that go into that. So I
Yeah.
think it's more than just like everyone wants to think that they can send one slide and you're like, hey, like our returns were in the top quartile, we've
Mhm.
outperformed our peers and things like that. Like that's a good to have. Obviously, you want to have that as well, but there's a lot of things that go into the decision.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll wrap up with one final like softball question, which is just how is being a Goldie alumni? How, you have come back, you've been a mentor the past couple of
Yeah.
years, you're doing this, you stay involved. You come to the gala, I hope, I assume. I think
Yeah.
I've seen you here.
Yeah.
Like how has the network either helped you or what have you enjoyed about since being a Goldie Scholar?
Yeah, I'll be like perfectly honest. Like when I was not planning to go back and get my MBA, but right, like there were a couple JLL people at the time who were big proponents of the program. So
Yeah.
really why I ended up doing it was because of the Goldie program, because I was like, hey, like I was still pretty young at the time, like needed more of a network, wanted to
Mhm.
learn more about real estate. And obviously, like I've transitioned from being a student to now kind of, giving back more in the mentorship or doing things like this. But I still find like, I guess two things. Whenever I like go to a Goldie event, I feel like if nothing else, I just leave there more motivated. Like I just feel like
Mhm.
it's a good, like always check in for me of like good cover, whether like the conversation is relevant to my career or not. I think it's just like a good, like usually I'm
Yeah.
more motivated or have more ideas. Like so if nothing else, like that has been, but I feel like I've made some great relationship, like a great network. And um I think it just creates the like you can always reach out to a Goldie scholar. It's just like a commonality that you're like, okay, if nothing else, it's like an intro that usually like gets a response. So I think it's invaluable from that perspective. So
A bunch of your own Rolodex. This is like
yes,
a
right. Well,
bunch
that's
of,
where you're like, hey, like I see some, and I think you guys have done a great job of like, I feel like early days it was like, okay, what do we do with the alumni, right? But
yeah.
then like now there is more of like a plan for like how do we continue out this
Hmm.
program from like education. So yeah, I'm a huge,
Totally. And
huge fan.
thanks. I know I kind of put you on the spot of like,
No.
there's no, and what's wrong with
If I
golden
didn't
ship?
like it, I wouldn't be doing it. It
Yeah,
feels like
yeah.
that was an easy bet.
But I do like your point of like it's always motivating. I think something that's like tough, I mean, being a woman in this industry, just being in this industry, period, is like it's going to be a grind sometimes and you might
Yeah.
doubt yourself. But coming to a Golden Nation event or talking to me or, coming to these
Yeah.
things like reinvigorates you and tells you to keep going and that,
Right.
we
It's
got
just like
you.
yeah, I agree. So you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
You guys are lucky to be part of this.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for coming today and doing this interview. I really appreciate it. And thank you all on the call for joining and for your questions. Leslie can always answer your questions in the
Yeah, reach
future.
out. Obviously, happy to have like conversations or,
Yeah,
meet up or just have coffee or a drink, whatever.
perfect. Okay, I'll end it there.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, no problem. Bye, everybody.